Hi everybody, welcome to Rain Shadows channel, where stories whisper with the rain. Before we begin, make sure everything is ready for a deep sleep. Close your eyes, relax your body, and let your mind drift with each tale. Don't forget to like and subscribe channel so you won't miss the next video. Now come with me into the darkness.
Erin never liked the fourth floor. Maple Hollow Inn was the kind of place that felt older than its wallpaper. Tucked in a quiet pocket of rural Maine, the hotel had creaky floors, floral drapes, and the smell of lemon cleaner permanently soaked into the walls. Erin had worked housekeeping there for almost 5 years, long enough to know which faucets leaked, which beds squeaked, and which doors you had to shoulder a little to open. But room 413? Nobody touched it. Guests never stayed there. Management always marked it under renovation, though Erin had never seen anyone working on it. It was just left alone, like everyone silently agreed not to talk about it until Monday morning. "Erin," said Miss Langford, the front desk manager. "Someone booked 413. Erin blinked. "Seriously?" Langford didn't smile. "VIP guest, last-minute change. We need it spotless." Erin didn't argue, just grabbed her cart and rolled it to the rickety elevator. The fourth floor was empty, silent as a chapel. She passed 409, then 411. Oddly enough, there was no room 412. Then, finally, 413. End of the hallway. The door looked the same as the others, but the brass number plate was duller, like it hadn't been polished in years. She unlocked it and pushed the door open. The room was clean. Immaculate, actually. Not a speck of dust on the dark wood furniture. Bedsheets tucked tight. Air smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Erin frowned. It looked like no one had stepped foot in there in ages, and yet it was perfect. She moved to the bathroom. Everything was normal, except for the mirror. The large oval mirror above the sink was fogged over like someone had just taken a long hot shower. But the air was cold. Erin wiped it with a towel. The fog vanished, briefly, then returned just as thick. She frowned, wiped it again with her sleeve. This time the mirror cleared. Her reflection stared back, but not quite. There was something. Delayed. Subtle. When she tilted her head to the right, the reflection hesitated for half a second. When she blinked, it blinked a heartbeat late. She stepped back, pulse rising. "Get a grip," she muttered. "You're tired." Still, she didn't look into the mirror again. Erin quickly finished checking the minibar, smoothed the bed again, and fled the room, heart thudding louder than her footsteps. As the door clicked shut behind her, she paused and glanced back, just for a moment. And for a split second, the mirror across the room caught the hallway in its reflection. In it, she wasn't walking away. She was standing still, watching herself go. The mirror in room 413. Part 2, reflections out of sync. Erin avoided the fourth floor for the next 2 days. She made excuses. Let another housekeeper take the upstairs linen run, said she had a bad knee when asked to restock the minibar cart. No one questioned her. No one ever wanted to be on 4 anyway. But 413 stayed with her. In dreams, mostly. She'd see herself standing in that bathroom, staring into the mirror as steam poured from nowhere, and in the reflection, her face wouldn't move. It just smiled. Wide. Too wide. Every time she woke up, her jaw ached from clenching. On Thursday, she passed the hallway security monitor during a break. The system was old, grainy black and white feed from fixed angles. Nothing modern. But something made her stop and rewind the recording for the previous night. 3:12 a.m. The hallway outside room 413 lit up. The door opened. And Erin walked out. Hair messy, no shoes, eyes open but blank. She stared straight into the camera for a full 5 seconds before walking slowly back down the hallway. Erin dropped her coffee. She hadn't left her apartment that night. She knew she hadn't. That same day, she was restocking toiletries on the 3rd floor when she caught her reflection in a hallway mirror. She paused. Her hands were still, but in the mirror, her fingers twitched, just once. She turned away. By Friday, the fear turned to obsession. She started testing mirrors, in the break room, in the staff locker, in the cafe near the front desk. All of them reflected normally. But whenever she caught even a sliver of her image in the hallway glass leading to 4113, it was always off. Her reflection was always standing a little straighter, smiling a little longer, blinking just a bit too late. It was like someone was trying to learn how to be her, to match, to replace. That night, she dreamed again. She stood in the bathroom of room 413, steam rolling across the floor. This time, her reflection looked normal, calm, friendly, until it lifted one hand and waved. Erin didn't wave back. She turned to run, but the door was gone. Only the mirror remained. And from it, the other Erin stepped out, one bare foot at a time, reaching for her. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The next day, she told Langford she was quitting. "I just need time," Erin said, clutching her coat like a lifeline. Langford raised a brow. "You sure?" Erin nodded quickly, avoiding the security monitor as she passed. She didn't see the feed flicker. Didn't see herself entering room 413 again at 3:12 a.m., smiling directly at the lens. Erin wasn't supposed to come back. She'd quit. She was done. But 3 days later, she found herself standing outside Maple Hollow Inn again, staring up at the fourth-floor windows like a moth pulled toward flame. She didn't remember the walk there. Didn't remember putting on her work shoes. But there she was. And room 413 was waiting. Instead of going upstairs, Erin walked to the old archive closet near the manager's office. She knew Langford kept old maintenance logs and guest records there, all in dusty filing cabinets no one had opened in years. She found what she was looking for in a yellowed ledger marked 1973. Margot Everly, housekeeping, disappeared on shift June 14th, last seen entering room 413. The notes were sparse, typed, cold, but there was a second page, a staff incident report, handwritten and half smudged. It was filed by another cleaner, a woman named Diane. Erin read it twice. Margot said she didn't like how the mirror looked at her, said it copied her wrong. One night she stayed late to clean something she forgot. I saw her on the security feed walk into 413. 5 minutes later, I passed the hallway. The door was open. I looked in. Margot was standing in front of the mirror, but her reflection wasn't doing the same thing. I blinked, and the real one was gone. Just the reflection left, and it smiled at me. Erin slammed the folder shut, hands shaking. Margot had never been found. Police ruled it stress-related disappearance. No foul play. Just gone. That night, Erin slept with her closet mirror covered. Didn't matter. She still dreamed. Room 413. Again. But this time the reflection wasn't hers. It was Margot's. And she spoke. "You're almost ready. The mirror only takes those who stare too long." Erin woke up gasping. A sharp pain bloomed behind her eyes. When she stumbled to the bathroom, she saw blood on her pillow, from her nose or maybe her ear. The bathroom mirror was fogged, and when she wiped it clean, it stayed fogged, except for the faint imprint of a face, smiling. The next morning, Erin got a call from Langford. "Hey," she said, "we found your name on the shift sheet for tonight. I thought you quit?" Erin froze. "I did." Langford sounded puzzled. "Weird, the sheet was printed yesterday. It has your initials. Room 413. Erin hung up. Her hands were shaking. She looked across the room to her bedroom mirror and saw herself already in uniform. Erin didn't remember arriving, but when she looked up, she was standing in front of the door to room 413, holding the master key in her left hand. The hallway was silent, too silent, like the air was waiting. The brass doorknob felt cold as ice. She opened the door. Inside, the room was exactly as she remembered, immaculate, lavender-scented, frozen in time. The bed was untouched. The curtains swayed gently, though the windows were sealed shut. But the mirror was clear now, too clear. Erin stepped closer. Her reflection stood still, posture perfect, eyes locked on hers, no lag, no delay, until it smiled. Erin didn't. She turned to run, but the door was gone, not closed, gone. A smooth wall now stood where it had been. She spun back to the mirror. Her reflection raised one hand. Erin's hand stayed by her sides. Then slowly her reflection pressed its palm against the glass, and from the other side it stepped out. 1 foot, then another. It was her, but not her. Its smile was wider, teeth too white, eyes just a bit too large, like it had been made to look like Erin, but the creator had never actually met a human before. She stumbled back, heart hammering. The reflection, no, the copy, leaned in close, face inches from hers. "I've watched so long," it whispered. "Now it's your turn." Before she could scream, it shoved her back into the mirror. Erin woke in darkness, smooth, cold, no air, no sound. She could see light, but only through glass. She raised her hands. They moved perfectly, but she couldn't feel her fingers. She screamed, but no sound came. Outside in room 413, the copy turned to the mirror and adjusted her name tag, smiled once more, then opened the door and walked out. 2 days later, Langford came up to check on room 413. The guest who had booked it never showed. When she entered, everything was normal. A little dusty, maybe, but nothing strange except the mirror. It was spotless, looked like it had just been cleaned. Langford leaned in, curious. For a second, she thought she saw 2 women standing in the reflection. One in the foreground, one further back. But when she looked around the room, it was empty, just her. She left quickly, didn't mention it to anyone. And now, room 413 is under renovation again. Nobody goes in. But if you happen to stay at Maple Hollow Inn, 4th floor, far end of the hall, you might pass by a certain door. And if you glance at the mirror through the gap in the curtain, you may see a woman standing there, not moving, just watching. And if you stare too long, she might start copying you. I was about 20 miles from home when the radio cut out. Just static, then silence. It was a cool September night in Kansas, the kind where the air smells like dry grass and the roads stretch forever without a single streetlight. I had just left my friend Mason's birthday party, too many cheap beers, too many bad country songs, and was doing my best to stay awake behind the wheel. The road I was on, Old County 7, sliced straight through miles of farmland with towering cornfields lining both sides like quiet sentinels. I wasn't drunk, but I was tired, too tired. So when the static gave way to complete silence, I leaned forward and started fiddling with the dial, thinking maybe the signal had just dropped. That's when I heard it. "Jake." A whisper, just one word. I sat back, eyes wide, hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Jake." It came again, louder this time. But it wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was outside the car. I slammed on the brakes. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as the car skidded to a stop, headlights slicing through the rows of corn just ahead. I sat there for a few seconds, listening. Nothing, just the ticking of the engine and the low hum of the wind. Maybe I imagined it. Then I heard it again. "Jake, help me." A voice calling my name, from the corn. I stepped out of the car. My boots hit the dirt road, and I immediately felt how quiet everything was. No crickets, no breeze, just the hush of something watching. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and clicked it on. The beam danced across the edges of the stalks, tall, dry, rustling slightly in the stillness. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone there?" Silence. And then, over here, it was my voice. Not just similar, not just close. Exactly my voice. Every hair on my body stood on end. I shined the flashlight toward the source, but all I saw were endless rows of corn. I took a step forward, then another. Something inside me screamed to get back in the car. "Drive. Don't look. Don't listen." But another part, stronger, dumber, was pulled in. I told myself maybe it was a recording, some prank, some farmer playing around with a speaker and a scanner. But deep down, I knew better, because the voice that called out next wasn't just begging for help. It was sobbing. "Please, I don't want to be here anymore." I turned off the car engine and walked into the cornfield. The first few steps into the corn felt like walking into a tunnel. The stalks were taller than I remembered, 8, maybe 9 feet high, leaning in just enough to block out the moonlight. My flashlight cut through the darkness in a narrow cone, but everything outside its reach was pitch black. "Hello?" I called again, softer this time. No answer, just the rustling of dry leaves brushing against my jacket. And then, "Jake." Closer now, I spun around. The voice hadn't come from ahead of me, it had come from behind. I turned the flashlight toward the road, but the beams showed only rows and rows of corn. My car was gone. No headlights, no road. I was already lost. My breathing quickened. I tried to retrace my steps, but the rows twisted in ways that didn't make sense. No matter which direction I turned, I couldn't find the edge. It was like the corn had shifted behind me. Then I saw it, a dim, flickering light through the stalks, like a flashlight struggling to stay alive. I moved toward it, crushing broken stalks underfoot, calling out louder now. "Hey, I see you! I'm coming!" The light vanished. But just a few yards ahead, something moved. I froze, a shape low to the ground crawling, limbs dragging, breathing ragged. Then I heard it, whimpering, desperate, human. I raised my light, and my stomach dropped. It was me, or someone who looked exactly like me. He was hunched over, his hoodie torn, face bruised and bloodied. Dirt covered his arms. His eyes met mine, and I'll never forget the sheer terror in them. He opened his mouth and whispered, "Don't listen to it. It's not me. It's not you either." I stepped back. What the hell are you talking about? The other me clutched his side. It copies, it calls. Once you answer, it keeps a part of you. His head jerked up suddenly, like he heard something. Then I heard it too. A low, slow rustling from all directions, stalks moving when no wind blew, like something massive was weaving through them, something just out of sight. And the voice came again, this time not like me, deeper, older, wrong. "Jake, stay with me." The crawling figure screamed, "Run!" I didn't wait. I turned and bolted, crashing through rows, stalks slapping my arms, dirt flying underfoot. The corn clawed at me, but I didn't stop. The voice followed, but it wasn't calling my name anymore. It was laughing. I don't know how long I ran. Branches tore at my jacket. My flashlight slipped from my grip and vanished beneath the dry, rustling sea. But I didn't dare stop. I didn't think. I just moved. And then, like the corn parted for me, I stumbled into a clearing and saw my car. Headlights still on. Driver's door open. I gasped for air, heart hammering. Relief hit me like a wave. I ran to the car, yanked open the door, and froze. Because someone was already in the driver's seat. He turned and looked at me. Same face, same clothes, same dirt on the left knee, but calm. He smiled, like he'd been expecting me. "Hey," he said, "you made it." My mouth went dry. Who are you?" He tilted his head. "I'm you, the one who got out." I took a step back. "No," I said, "I'm me. You don't remember," he said, still smiling. "Of course you don't, that's part of the trick. It always keeps one." Behind me, the corn rustled again. That low, unnatural movement I'd been running from was back, closer, surrounding us. "You need to get in the car," he said, "now." "What happens if I don't?" He shrugged. "Then you stay, like I did, until the next version comes looking." "I found someone else," I said, suddenly remembering the wounded copy in the field. He warned me. "I did too, once," the figure in the driver's seat said. "Didn't help him either, did it?" I stared at him, heart pounding. Something about him was wrong. The way he didn't blink. The way the smile never moved. Too still. "Why should I believe you're the real me?" I asked. He leaned forward slowly. "Because you're not real either. And if we don't leave now, neither of us will be." I turned to look behind me, just for a second. And in that moment, something moved in the corn. Not a person. Not an animal. Something taller than the stalks, rising above the rows like smoke, with too many arms, and 1,000 eyes that blinked all at once. I lunged for the car. The door slammed shut behind me. We peeled off in a spray of gravel, leaving the whispering, writhing corn behind. Neither of us said a word. But as the road unspooled ahead, I glanced at the man in the passenger seat. He was still smiling. It's been 2 weeks since that night. I haven't been back to the cornfield. I haven't driven down County Road 7. I barely sleep. And when I do, I dream of rows of stalks taller than skyscrapers, closing in, whispering things I don't want to hear. The man I drove home with is gone. When we reached the edge of town, I blinked, and the passenger seat was empty. No sign of him. No indent in the cushion. Nothing. But I know I didn't drive back alone. For days afterwards, strange things started happening. I found my boots caked with dried mud and blood outside the back door, even though I'd thrown them away. My bathroom mirror fogged up while I was at work, and when I wiped it clean, someone had written, "You left me." My phone plays back voicemails I never recorded. They're always short, always the same whisper, "Jake, come back." Worse still, my reflection doesn't always move with me anymore. Just for a second. Just a flicker. But I see it. The hesitation. The delay. Like something wearing me is trying to keep up. And then there's the voice. Sometimes when everything is quiet just before sleep, I hear it from the hallway outside my bedroom. "Jake." But it doesn't sound like it did that night. It sounds like me, pleading, begging, trapped. I tried to talk to someone, a therapist, a priest, even a paranormal investigator from Wichita I found on a conspiracy forum. They all thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I am, but I know what I heard, what I saw, what I left behind. A few nights ago, I found something sitting on my kitchen counter when I came home. It was my old flashlight, the one I dropped in the corn. Still cracked, still covered in dry earth, it turned on, and when the beam hit the wall, it cast a shadow that wasn't mine. Last night, as I was driving home from a late shift, I passed a stretch of road I hadn't seen before. Flat, dark, empty. The corn had been harvested weeks ago, but when I looked out the window, the fields were full again, tall, moving. And as my headlights swept across the rows, I saw something just for a moment. A man, standing still between the stalks, covered in dirt and blood. He looked just like me, and he mouthed the words, "Help me." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. But now I'm not sure I ever really left, because every mirror, every photo, every whisper keeps reminding me maybe I'm the one still inside the cornfield. David moved into the house in late October, just as the wind began carrying the kind of cold that lingered in the bones. It was a simple place, a single-story wood frame house tucked at the edge of a quiet town. It had been empty for years, cheap and unassuming, just enough space for one person and not much more. After the divorce, David hadn't needed anything big, just quiet, just somewhere no one would ask questions. The nights came early out there. The kind of early that made time feel strange, like you could blink and realize it was already midnight. On those first evenings, David spent most of his time reading by the fireplace, letting the silence press in around him. The floorboards groaned with every shift of temperature, but otherwise the house behaved. Until the fourth night. He had just finished a chapter, the light from the fire barely enough to illuminate the pages, when he heard it. Faint at first, like the shuffle of mice between walls. Then it came again, a sound beneath the floor, 3 soft knocks, even and measured, like knuckles on wood from the wrong side. He froze, listening. The wind outside had stopped, the trees had gone still. Only that sound remained, far too deliberate to be the house settling. He stood heart-thudding and walked slowly to the center of the room. The rug under his feet muffled his steps. The knocks came once more, slightly louder this time. And then, from beneath the boards, a whisper, quiet, ragged, almost impossible to hear. But it spoke, and it used his voice. He didn't move. The whisper came again, soft and broken, as though carried from somewhere far below. David, it was unmistakable. Not similar. Exact. His own voice, strained and hollow, curling up from beneath the floor. He backed away without meaning to, feet moving on their own. The whisper said nothing more that night. Only the knocks remained, once, twice, then silence. He didn't sleep. The fire burned low. The air felt colder than before. He stayed in his chair until dawn, staring at the boards beneath his feet, half convinced they would move. By morning, the house was still. The wind returned. The birds began to sing again, as if nothing had ever disturbed the balance. But from that moment on, David knew something had changed. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was listening. The voice returned the next night, not with a knock, not with a whisper. It simply arrived, folded into the stillness of the room like a sound that had always been there, waiting to be noticed. David was sitting by the window when he heard it. No wind, no footsteps, just his own voice, rising softly from beneath the floorboards. It didn't call his name this time. It spoke in fragments, small pieces of thoughts that didn't belong to the moment, yet were unmistakably his. You don't like how the house smells when it rains. You never told her why you stopped painting. You think about the pills in the drawer every Thursday. Each sentence struck like a stone dropped into a deep well. They were not memories. They were private thoughts, fleeting, silent, held tightly within the space of his own skull. No one should have known them. No one could have. He tried turning on the television to drown it out. The signal flickered once, then cut to static. The voice continued. Soft, calm, repetitive. David unplugged the TV, turned on every light in the house, paced until morning. But nothing changed. The voice didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't demand. It simply reflected. Over the next few days, he tried to test it. He would think something deliberately absurd, sentences he would never normally form, then wait. At first, nothing happened, but eventually the voice caught up. One night, after hours of silence, it murmured, "You're wondering what would happen if you fed me." David stopped breathing for a moment. He hadn't spoken that thought aloud. Hadn't even let it fully form. But there it was, spoken in his voice. With his inflection, from under the floor, he bought a digital recorder, set it to run while he slept or tried to. In the morning, he listened back. For the first 20 minutes, silence. Then a rustling, a breath. Then his voice again, recorded in the darkness. "Don't go in the crawl space. If you answer me, I'll be free." The words repeated twice, then stopped. At the end of the recording, something else. A pause and a question. Spoken slowly, almost like a smile behind the words. "Do you remember putting me here?" David dropped the recorder. For the rest of the day, the house felt colder. The floorboards groaned more often, as if something was stretching beneath them, remembering its shape. That night, the voice didn't speak, but when David pulled back the rug in the bedroom, he found a small smudge on the floorboards. The outline of a hand, pressed from underneath. The smudge didn't fade. Even after he cleaned it, once with a rag, twice with bleach, it remained faintly visible. A handprint, perfectly shaped, smaller than his own, burned into the wood like a memory that refused to be forgotten. It appeared just beside the edge of his bed. And after that, David couldn't sleep. He spent hours each night lying still, listening to the floor, waiting, and eventually it came. The voice returned. Not from the living room, but from beneath the bed, deeper this time, like it had moved closer. And it whispered, "You left something down here." In the morning, David rolled up the rug. He had walked this room countless times, lived in it without looking. But now, with the floor bare and quiet, he noticed a single uneven seam between the boards, a rectangular outline. Narrow, faint, a trapdoor. He dug a screwdriver into the edge. The wood creaked. Dust spilled up, soft and dry like old breath. Beneath the panel was a crawl space he'd never known existed, about 4 feet high, lined with dirt and cobwebs. Cold air rose from within, carrying the scent of old wood, damp earth, and something sweeter underneath, like decaying leaves. He hesitated only briefly before climbing in. It was darker than he expected, and quieter. Even the house above seemed far away, like a distant place he no longer belonged to. He crawled forward with a flashlight, his knees pressing into loose soil. The walls narrowed the deeper he went, as if the house had been built around this cavity but had forgotten to name it. Then he found the recorder. An old cassette model. Dusty but functional. Still humming with a faint red light. He pressed play. It clicked. And his voice began speaking immediately. "If you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I thought I had more time." He paused the tape. His heart pounded. He had never said those words. Not in memory, not in waking. He opened the nearby metal tin. Inside, a notebook. Old, soft with wear. Its cover marked with his initials. He flipped it open. Every page was filled with writing, his handwriting. Dates, observations, drawings of the crawl space. And notes about the voice. As he read, the entries grew more fragmented, more desperate, until the last page, where only one line remained. "If it sounds like you, don't answer." He dropped the notebook. The air around him grew heavier. Behind him, in the dark, something shifted. He turned, flashlight trembling. The dirt had moved. Footprints, small, bare, leading deeper into the dark. David didn't speak for the rest of the day. He sat in the living room with the notebook on his lap, the tape recorder on the table beside him, both whispering to him even in silence. The words no longer surprised him. He'd read them. He'd written them. At some point, he wasn't sure which came first. Outside, the world continued its usual rhythm. Birds, cars, wind in the trees. But inside, time felt paused. The air had weight. The corners of the house seemed to bend slightly inward. He tried to tell himself he'd imagined it, that the notebook was a fabrication, the recorder a trick. But then he looked at the handwriting again. It was too familiar, too exact. It wasn't a copy. It was his. That night, he sealed the trapdoor, hammered nails into the corners, laid furniture over it, covered it with rugs, then more rugs, as if enough layers would keep it from calling again. But it didn't matter, because the voice no longer needed the crawl space. It had moved with him. Into the walls, the mirrors, the back of his mind. He tried to leave the house, packed a bag, got in the car, started the engine. But when he pulled out of the driveway, the road seemed longer than it should have been. The trees didn't look right. Familiar but repeated, like driving through the same frame of a film, looped endlessly. He turned around, and the house was there, waiting. No matter which road he took. The neighbors stopped seeing him during the day. But at night, a faint light glowed through the curtains. and occasionally the low hum of a tape recorder could be heard just under the floorboards, whispering softly through the vent. One morning, a contractor arrived, hired by a relative to check on the house long after David had stopped answering. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the rooms were cold, undisturbed, the air dry and still. The contractor found the sealed trapdoor, and beneath it the crawl space. It was deeper than expected, wider. At the end of the tunnel, they found a small room, empty, except for a chair, a recorder, and a notebook. The recorder was still running, and the notebook left open bore a final line. He left something down here, but it still remembers the way up. Eli hadn't planned on moving back into his parents' house. But after the divorce, the layoffs, and 3 months of sleeping in his car, the crumbling 2-story on Hollow Creek Road started to look less like a graveyard and more like a mercy. The place was mostly untouched since his father passed away. Dust hung like fog in every room. The clocks were still set to daylight savings time from 2 years ago, and in the living room, like a relic that refused to die, stood his dad's ancient CRT television, thick glass screen, wood panel sides, rabbit ear antenna still clinging to one last wobble of dignity. Eli didn't even like watching TV anymore. But that first night back, the silence was too loud. It was 1:12 a.m. when he turned the TV on. Only a handful of channels still worked. Old game shows, late-night infomercials, a Spanish soap opera with terrible lighting. Out of boredom, he began clicking upward. Channel 87, 88, 89. At channel 98, the signal ended. Static. Hissing grey snow. He was about to turn it off when the image flickered, just for a second. Then again. He leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The noise rippled, then formed the faint outline of a room. His room, the living room. But not from where he was sitting. It was a high angle, like a security cam in the corner of the ceiling. The couch, the lamp, the coffee mug he had just set down. And then, him, sitting on the couch watching the TV, a few seconds behind. Eli stood up, heart racing. On the screen, he stood up too, lagging by 2, maybe 3 seconds. He turned his head, so did the version of him on screen. He waved one hand slowly. The screen waved back, just slightly out of sync. He grabbed the remote and slammed the power button. The screen went black. The hum stopped. He sat in the dark for a long time, listening to his own breath. The next morning, he unplugged the TV, just to be safe. But later that night, when he walked past the living room, it was on. The static was back. Channel 99. And his coffee mug on the screen was now empty, even though the real one in his hand was still full. Eli didn't touch the TV again. He unplugged it, twice, removed the antenna, even yanked the power strip out of the wall entirely. Still, every night around 1 a.m. the static returned. The screen would flicker to life, humming faintly, bathing the living room in a pale grey glow. And always it would show him, moving, breathing, sometimes doing things he hadn't done. On the third night, he ran an experiment. He placed a sticky note in the center of the couch that read, "Not real." Then he sat in the kitchen with the lights off, peering through the doorway. At 1:07 a.m., the screen lit up. The static wavered, then resolved into the living room. His living room. And there it was, the couch, the lamp, the note. But the man on the screen, his double, was already sitting. Already watching. No note in his hand, just smiling slightly. Then, without warning, the figure on screen turned its head toward the kitchen doorway. Right at him. Ellie ducked. His heart thundered in his ears. He stayed up the rest of the night. At dawn, the TV was off again. No sign it had ever been on. But the sticky note was gone. The next morning, Eli searched every inch of the house. No cameras, no hidden wires, no smart devices. He wasn't even connected to Wi-Fi. He tried recording the static channel on his phone, once, just once. But when he played it back, it was nothing but white snow, like he'd never pointed the camera at anything. That afternoon, a thought struck him. What if it wasn't recording now, but had always been? He dug through the boxes in the attic, found his father's old VHS tapes, all unlabeled. Dozens of them. He picked one at random, popped it into the old VCR. The tape began with a date stamp, 3/17/1996, Camo 2, living room feed. The footage showed a much younger version of the same house, same furniture, Same couch. And a man. Not his father, but someone sitting exactly where Eli had sat last night. Alone. Staring at a TV just out of frame. The man turned slowly to face the camera. He smiled, then whispered, "He's watching now." Eli hit stop, but the VCR kept playing. The screen flickered, and the static returned. But this time there was a faint red text at the top of the screen. "Now recording, Channel 99, live feed." Eli stopped sleeping in the living room. He moved into the guest room, unplugged every device, even taped over the peephole on the door. The static channel didn't care. It followed him anyway. On the fifth night, the static started earlier. 12:48 a.m. Eli had been in the kitchen when he heard the telltale hum, low and electric, leaking down the hallway like smoke. He didn't go check. Instead, he pulled out his phone and called a friend. First time he'd tried reaching anyone since the nightmare started. It went to voicemail. When he tried again, the screen blinked once, then glitched. The camera turned on by itself, and on the screen his own face stared back. But his lips were moving. He wasn't speaking, but the image on the phone was. You're already inside it. Then the screen went black. Eli smashed the phone against the counter. Pieces scattered across the tile like broken teeth. He didn't care anymore. By morning, he packed a small bag and left the house. He drove across town to a cheap motel and paid for a week in cash. Room 6, no frills. Boxy old TV bolted to the dresser. He didn't plan on turning it on. But that night, as he sat on the edge of the bed, the TV powered up on its own. Channel 99. Flicker. Snow. Then the motel room. Same bed sheets. Same flickering lamp. And on the edge of the bed, him. But something was off. The figure on the screen was hunched forward, head tilted slightly. Its hands were folded neatly on its lap, and its eyes were already locked on him. Eli stood. So did the figure. He reached for the remote and hit power. The screen blinked, then showed him again, from a new angle. The ceiling. He checked the ceiling. No camera, no vent, nothing. But when he looked back, the screen now showed him standing at the foot of the bed. He backed away. The figure on screen did not. He covered the TV with a towel, didn't sleep, didn't move. At dawn, he cautiously lifted the towel. The screen was off, but burned into the glass were red letters. Channel 99 is always live. He checked out that morning, drove for hours, didn't stop until he was halfway across the state. He rented a cabin. No electronics, no signal. But that night, as he sat by the fireplace, he heard it. A faint, distant hum. He turned toward the shadows of the kitchen and saw a small, battery-powered TV sitting on the counter. He hadn't brought it. The screen flickered and then showed the cabin, from above. Eli stared at the tiny TV on the cabin counter. It buzzed softly, the screen flickering like a slow heartbeat. Then the image sharpened. It was the cabin. The same brick fireplace, the same crooked lamp, the same man, him, sitting in the same chair staring at nothing. Except the man in the TV looked softer, lighter, as if something inside had been scraped clean. Eli stepped back. The figure didn't move, but the camera angle changed, without warning, without reason. Now it was behind him. Looking over his shoulder, he spun around. Nothing, just darkness and static. The fire crackled behind him, but no warmth reached his skin. The room felt hollow, as if it had been copied too many times. He grabbed the TV and threw it to the floor. The glass cracked, but the screen stayed on. And now it showed something else. A timestamp. A 2:41 a.m. live feed. Room active, followed by a blinking label, archiving Ely 023. He didn't know what that meant, but something deep in his chest did. Something older than memory. He ran outside. The forest stretched in every direction. No cars, no lights, no roads, but the hum followed him, carried in the wind, wrapped in the trees. He turned and turned and turned until the cabin stood in front of him again. Even though he had run the opposite way, the door creaked open before he touched it. Inside, the fire was out, the chair was empty, the TV screen glowed. And on it, a blank room, just a chair, just a man walking in. Not yet. He stepped forward, the screen shimmered. Then he was back in the chair. Or maybe he never left. His limbs felt stiff, his hands folded themselves. The screen in front of him now mirrored only his face. Eyes open, unblinking, breathing but not thinking, smiling but not alive. Outside the cabin, the wind carried a signal only a few old TVs could still catch. In a second-hand shop in another state, a vintage CRT turned itself on in the middle of the night. Channel 99, at first just static. Then a cabin, a chair, a man unmoving, and a line of red text blinking steadily at the top. Channel 100, broadcast complete. Viewer archived, ready for next signal. It was supposed to be the easiest money Caleb ever made. 7 nights. 1 room. 1 bed. No phones, no screens, no caffeine after 5 p.m. The contract was thick, the clipboard heavier than it needed to be, but the numbers on the final page were all he cared about. $2,000 for 7 nights of monitored sleep. As a psychology major trying to pay off student loans and stretch a can of beans into 3 meals, it felt like winning the lottery if the lottery involved a lot of paperwork and a windowless room with no Wi-Fi. The research center was clean, quiet, and colder than he expected. The staff wore white coats and friendly smiles. A woman named Dr. Lena walked him through the intake process. "Have you experienced sleepwalking before?" "Nope," Caleb replied. "Night terrors? Sleep paralysis? Unexplained memory gaps?" "I mean, sure, college, but nothing medical." She smiled politely and made a note. "We'll just monitor brainwave activity and facial expression during REM cycles. You won't feel a thing." Caleb was led to room 4B, a small soundproof chamber with a bed, a single ceiling light, and a black dome in the corner. Camera. He made a joke about being on reality TV. No one laughed. The first night went fine. He slept like a rock. In the morning, a nurse brought him black coffee, scrambled eggs, and a clipboard with a simple form. "Rate your sleep quality from 1 to 5. 5, he said. "Seriously, do people ever rate it lower?" The nurse shrugged. "Sometimes the ones who don't wake up right." On the 3rd morning, Dr. Lena sat across from him with a different clipboard. Her tone was casual, but her pen didn't move. "Do you remember waking up around 2:40 last night?" "No." "Are you sure?" Caleb frowned. "Yeah, why?" She tilted her head. "You stood up, walked to the far corner of the room, faced the camera, and smiled." Caleb blinked. "Okay." "You stood there for 17 minutes, no movement, just smiling, staring." He gave a short laugh. "That's creepy as hell." She didn't laugh. "Do you recall any dreams?" "No, just nothing." Dr. Lena made another note. "Some subjects enter a fugue-like state. It's not uncommon, but we'll keep an eye on it." "Right, because that's not unsettling at all," Caleb muttered, trying to keep the mood light. She just nodded, then added almost as an afterthought, "Please remember, for your safety and the integrity of the study, you've agreed not to attempt self-monitoring, recording, or interfering with the observation process." Caleb's smile faded. He didn't remember signing that, but he didn't say anything. Not yet. That night, Caleb tried to stay awake. He drank chamomile tea, lay perfectly still under the thin hospital blanket, and stared at the blinking red light on the ceiling camera. He figured if he could push past 3 a.m., he'd catch whatever weird sleepwalking moment the researchers had mentioned. He made it to 2:37 a.m., then nothing. He woke up at 7 a.m., back in bed, tucked in the same way he always was. He felt fine. Not groggy, not tense, just normal. Which made the video harder to explain. Dr. Lena called him into the review room that morning. There was no clipboard this time, just a flat-screen monitor showing a paused video feed labeled Night 3, Subject 4B. She didn't speak as she hit play. The footage showed Caleb asleep, blanket rising and falling with his breath. At 2:41 a.m., he sat up, not slowly, not like someone rousing from a dream. He snapped up, eyes open. He stood, walked to the far wall, and turned to face the camera. His eyes locked dead center on the lens. Then he smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, tight-lipped. Not amused, calculated. He stood that way for exactly 70 minutes. Didn't blink, didn't sway. Then, just as suddenly, he turned, walked back to bed, lay down, and resumed breathing like nothing had happened. The video ended. Caleb's mouth was dry. "That's not me," he said. "It is," Dr. Lena replied calmly. "No, I mean, yes, I see that it's me, but I wasn't awake. I didn't dream. I didn't move. I don't remember any of that." She tapped her pen against her notebook. Sleepwalking can manifest in strange ways. Sleepwalkers don't make eye contact with cameras. She didn't respond. That night, Caleb pressed his ear to the wall of his room. Nothing. He tried to whisper something, anything, to provoke a reaction from the camera, some glitch in the system. Still nothing. At 2:38 a.m., his eyelids grew heavy. He bit the inside of his cheek to stay awake. He blinked. Only once. But when his eyes opened again, it was morning, and his jaw ached from smiling too hard. He wasn't given breakfast that day. Instead, he was brought directly to the review room. This time, there were 2 videos. The first was the same 17-minute stare, but the second, it was audio only, recorded from the wall mic in room 4B. At 2:42 a.m., there was breathing, then a whisper. His own voice. "Don't interrupt me tonight, he's almost through," Dr. Lena asked. "Do you remember saying that?" Caleb shook his head slowly. His throat felt too tight to speak. Because the worst part wasn't the voice. It was the way he said, he. Like he wasn't talking about himself. Like someone else had taken his place while he slept. Caleb stopped trusting his own body. During the day, he caught himself, touching his face too often, smiling at things he didn't find funny, holding his hands behind his back while standing, something he had never done before. Small things, subtle, but wrong. He stared at his reflection for minutes at a time. Sometimes it blinked just a bit too late. Sometimes it didn't blink at all. On the 5th night, he hid a voice recorder in his sock. He wasn't supposed to. The contract was clear. No self-monitoring, no external devices. But Caleb didn't care anymore. He needed proof. For himself. When he woke, he grabbed the recorder before the staff could enter. He played it back in the bathroom while pretending to brush his teeth. For the first hour, it was just the sound of slow, steady breathing. Then at 2:41 a.m., the breathing stopped. There was a creak, the bed, then footsteps, then his voice. "Stop recording me." The next sound was a low, static hum followed by a mechanical click. The recorder shut off. Caleb stared at the screen. The battery was still full. There was no reason it should have stopped, and yet the rest of the file was blank. That afternoon, he confronted Dr. Lena. "I want out," he said. "I'm done." She didn't look surprised. "We strongly recommend completing the protocol," she said. "Discontinuing now would affect the results, your compensation. I don't care about the money." "Then care about your mind," she said, folding her hands. "We've seen this before. Resistance to the process causes fractures. Your sense of time, self-control, it's not being taken, it's being shared." "With who?" Caleb snapped. Dr. Lena looked at him for a long time, then said, "You'll know by the last night." That evening, he found his bed already turned down, pillow fluffed, blanket folded, and resting on the mattress was a folded piece of paper. A drawing. Childlike, crude. It showed 2 stick figures, one standing, one sleeping, and in shaky, uneven handwriting, "I watch while you rest. Soon we'll switch." Caleb didn't remember drawing it, but it was signed at the bottom. He lay awake that night sweating, fists clenched under the covers. He watched the red light blink on the ceiling camera. 9. He forced his eyes to stay open. He blinked, and suddenly he was standing, facing the wall, his hands behind his back, the red light of the camera warming his face. He didn't remember getting up. He didn't remember how long he'd been smiling. But from somewhere deep inside, a thought bubbled up like static. He's watching now, and this time, he's staying. Caleb didn't remember leaving the research center, but when he woke up, he was home. In his apartment, dressed, showered, phone fully charged. His fridge was stocked, the blinds were drawn, the answering machine blinked once, one new message. He didn't play it. Not yet. Instead, he sat on his couch for nearly an hour, staring at his laptop, at the folder labeled Cam Feed Room 4B. It hadn't been there before. He hadn't put it there. They hadn't given him copies. He hadn't asked. And yet, there they were. 7 video files, each dated, each marked night 1 through night 7. He clicked on night 3. The screen flickered to life. The footage was from inside his sleep chamber. Standard angle, low light. He watched himself sleep. Then, right on time, his body rose, snapped upright, walked to the far wall, faced the camera, smiled. But this time the video didn't stop after 17 minutes. This time he spoke, calm, voice steady. He's awake now. You can stop watching. He won't remember this part anyway. Then he stepped forward, placed his hand over the lens, and the screen went black. The screen shut off. Not powered down. Shut off. He hadn't touched anything. From across the room, the answering machine beeped. He walked over, pressed play. His voice whispered, "Sleep well, Caleb. This time, don't wake up." 3 days later, a friend stopped by to check in. The door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was spotless. Nothing seemed out of place, except Caleb. He was sitting at his desk, eyes closed, breathing slowly, smiling. And on the laptop screen was a black window with a blinking red dot. Live. The apartment was smaller than she hoped, but the rent was unbeatable. Claire signed the lease in 20 minutes, barely glancing at the fine print. After the divorce, after months of bouncing between couches and sleeping in her car, a one-bedroom in an aging Chicago walk-up felt like a palace. The building had charm. Exposed brick, creaky wooden floors, frosted glass windows that let in just enough of the city's buzz to make her feel less alone. Only one thing felt off. The silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was thick, dense, like the walls were waiting to speak. Her unit, 3C, sat next to another, 3B. The landlord, a tired man with yellow teeth and the personality of drywall, told her someone lived there. Mr. Howard, quiet fella. Been here a long time, he said, handing over the keys. You won't hear a peep. Claire didn't. Not for the first 3 days. Then the peep started. It began with the sound of a chair scraping slowly across the floor, always at night, always between 2 and 3 a.m., like someone was dragging furniture inch by inch. Then came the footsteps, measured, deliberate, pacing the same 3 steps over and over, then stopping. And the worst part, the tapping. A light, rhythmic knock. Not loud enough to complain about, not fast enough to ignore. Tap, tap, tap. Right against the shared wall behind her bed. She assumed it was just a neighbor with bad sleep or weird habits, but by the 4th night, her curiosity overruled her exhaustion. She crept to the wall and pressed her ear to it. At first, nothing. Then suddenly, a sound that didn't belong on the other side of drywall. Breathing. Slow. Even, as if someone was standing inches away, matching her heartbeat with every inhale. Claire jerked back. Her apartment was freezing. She turned on every light and tried to laugh at herself. "It's just an old man," she whispered, forcing a smile. "Probably on oxygen or something." She didn't sleep. The next day, she baked banana bread and olive branch and knocked on Mr. Howard's door. No answer. She knocked again, louder, pressed her ear to the door. Silence. She glanced down. No doormat, no mail, no sign of life. Back in her unit, she noticed something strange. The chair she used at her small kitchen table, the one she always tucked in, was now angled toward the wall, facing the noise, facing him. Claire bought foam earplugs the next day. They didn't help. The tapping continued, always after 2 a.m., always 3 slow knocks, like a code only 2 people knew. And now there were new sounds, a dragging sound, a whisper too faint to make out, and the breathing, always the breathing. At first she tried to rationalize it. Old pipes, settling floorboards, her own imagination. But deep down she knew the difference between sounds a building made and sounds made by someone else. By the end of the week, she couldn't help herself. She set her phone on the nightstand and opened the voice memo app. Hit record, faced the wall, then she waited. The next morning, sunlight barely pushing through the dusty blinds, Claire opened the recording. At first, static, then the usual ambient hum of the room. She fast-forwarded through nearly 20 minutes of nothing. Then, just past the 23-minute mark, came a sound that made her go still. A man's voice. Not yelling, not talking, whispering. She turned the volume up, held the phone to her ear. "Don't turn around." The voice was low, gravelly, inches from the mic, as if it had been recorded right next to the phone. But she had been alone. The phone had been sitting untouched on her nightstand. She checked the waveform. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a prank. It was real. That afternoon, she went to the building manager's office in the lobby, a cluttered space that smelled like stale coffee and wet paper. "Hey," Claire said, trying to keep her voice light. "Is Mr. Howard okay? I keep hearing things." The manager looked up slowly. "Howard?" "Yeah, the tenant next door, 3B. A pause. Then a dry chuckle. "There's no tenant in 3B. That unit's been vacant since 2017. Water damage. No one goes in there." Claire blinked. "That's not possible. I hear someone every night." The manager raised an eyebrow. "You sure it's not just the pipes?" Claire didn't go home right away. She sat on a bench outside the building for over an hour, watching the third-floor windows, watching the one she knew belonged to 3B. The curtain never moved. But once, just once, she thought she saw a shape standing behind the glass. Too still, too tall, watching her. She placed her phone at the foot of the bed, camera facing the wall. She hit record, turned off the lights and lay down, eyes wide open. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. But she must have drifted off, because at 4:17 a.m. she jolted awake to silence. The tapping had stopped. The room felt wrong. Too quiet. She reached for the phone. Stopped. The chair was turned again, facing the wall. And the phone? Still recording. Its screen showed 2 hours at 13 minutes of footage. And in the last frame, there was a shadow standing between the wall and the bed, where no one should have been. Claire didn't tell the manager. She didn't tell anyone. The next morning, she borrowed a lockpick kit from a college friend who owed her a favor and told herself it was just for peace of mind, that she'd step inside, see an empty apartment, and be done with it. She waited until after dark, waited for the hallway to fall still, the building to settle into its nighttime hush. Then she stepped out and faced the door of 3B. It looked no different than hers. Same paint, same scuffed doorknob, but something about the silence behind it felt unnatural, like it was waiting for her. She hesitated only once before slipping the pick into the lock. It clicked open too easily. The air inside was cold, stale. Claire stepped in and clicked on her flashlight. Dust hung like cobwebs. The floor creaked beneath her. The furniture was sparse, just a table, a worn couch, and a single wooden chair in the far corner. She turned in a slow circle. The apartment was empty, almost. On the far wall, the one that backed against her bedroom, was something that made her knees buckle. The wall was covered in notes. Hundreds of them, all handwritten, yellowed with age, taped or pinned or simply stuck with dried glue. She's listening again. Don't speak when she's awake. She doesn't see me yet. Soon. Claire stepped closer, skin crawling. Every note was written in the same hand, jagged, looping, frantic. Just beneath them, mounted in the wall, a small camera, embedded deep, wires snaking into the drywall. The lens pointed directly at her apartment, not the wall, through it. Claire stumbled backward. Her foot hit something. She turned and screamed. A mannequin, faceless, armless, dressed in her clothes, her old hoodie, the one she'd thrown out a week ago, hanging limp as if waiting to be filled. She ran, out the door, down the stairs, didn't stop until she was outside, breath fogging in the cold night air. When she looked up at her apartment window, she saw the curtain flutter, and a figure behind it, still watching. She checked into a motel across town that night, filed a report with the police the next day. When they searched 3B, there was nothing. No notes, no camera, no mannequin. The apartment was bare. The dust disturbed only by her own footprints. The lock had been changed. The landlord claimed no one had access to that unit for years. That night, as Claire packed her things in the motel room, she heard a sound. 3 soft knocks. She froze. It came again. Tap, tap, tap. She turned slowly toward the closet door. It stood slightly ajar. Inside, it was empty, but on the mirror above the dresser, a foggy handprint. And beneath it, scrawled in moisture, "You live next to me now." 2 months after Claire vanished from the lease records, the apartment is listed again, cleaned, repainted, marketed as charming and quiet, perfect for working professionals. Rent slightly higher this time. No mention of the previous tenant. No mention of the police report or the complaints. The new tenant, Sarah Lynn, moved in during the first week of February. She was quiet, lived alone, remote tech job, didn't ask questions, didn't have any reason to. At first. Sarah liked the place. It had character. The light in the morning was soft and golden, and the creaky floorboards made her feel less lonely somehow. Only one thing struck her as odd. The apartment next door was always dark, always silent. She assumed it was vacant until the building manager casually mentioned, "Mr. Howard still rents it, doesn't like visitors, but don't worry, you'll never hear a sound." She didn't. Not exactly. But sometimes, late at night, when she paused her music or podcasts and just sat still, she thought she could hear shifting. Not loud, just the faint scrape of furniture. A slow drag, then silence. Once she laughed it off. Old building noises, she texted a friend. But a week later, she woke up at 3:12 a.m. Her bedroom felt colder than usual, and there was a sound. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks from the wall behind her bed. She held her breath, eyes locked on the ceiling, didn't move. It didn't happen again. That morning, over coffee, she decided to mention it to her neighbour across the hall, an older woman named Margie. "Oh, don't worry about him," Margie said, sipping her tea. "He's lived here forever, never says a word." Sarah frowned. "Have you ever seen him?" Margie paused. "I think once, years ago, or maybe that was someone else, but you'll get used to the quiet. It's a peaceful floor." Sarah forced a smile and nodded, but that night she placed her phone on the nightstand and opened her voice recorder, just in case. She forgot about it for a few days, until she checked the file on a whim. 37 minutes in, the static shifted. A whisper emerged, so faint she had to replay it several times before it clicked. "She hears me now. Don't turn around." Sarah sat frozen for almost 10 minutes before slowly closing the app. She never listened to the recording again. Weeks later, in a Reddit thread titled "Creepiest Neighbor Experiences," a user named Slin78 wrote, "I live in a quiet old apartment in Chicago. The guy next door never makes a sound. But some nights, I swear I hear him whispering my name through the wall. Just once or twice. I've never seen him. I don't even know if he's real, but I don't think I live alone." We bought the house in late October, just as the trees in Vermont were turning that perfect shade of rust and gold. Rachel and I had just moved up from New Jersey after I left my job in advertising. We were both tired of city noise, sleepless nights, and apartment walls that felt thinner than paper. This house, an old colonial 2-story just outside Montpelier, was supposed to be our fresh start. A quiet place to maybe raise a kid, maybe start a garden. A place that was ours. From the outside, the house was charming in that needs work kind of way. Peeling paint, shutters half hanging, a porch that creaked with every breeze. The listing said it had been built in 1911 and hadn't been occupied for over a decade. The price was suspiciously low, but the structure was solid, and we figured most of the repairs would be cosmetic. The real estate agent, a twitchy guy named Doug, didn't say much during the tour. He just smiled too much and kept talking about the unique personality of the place. When I asked about the original blueprints, he brushed it off, said we could probably find them in the attic or garage if we cared enough. I didn't push. A week after we moved in, I found them, rolled up inside a cracked plastic bin buried under old tarps in the garage. The paper was yellowed, but still legible. The floor plan matched the house we'd been walking through for days. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom upstairs, kitchen and study below, cellar door out back. Clean and simple. No surprises. But there was a surprise. It came the night the storm hit. The nor'easter rolled in hard, with winds that howled like a dying thing and rain that slammed against the roof in sheets. Around 2 a.m. we heard a crash upstairs, like wood splintering. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the noise. One of the bedroom walls had split open at the seam, just a hairline crack, probably from old water damage. But what caught my eye wasn't the crack. It was the faint outline of something behind the wallpaper, a rectangular shape, about the size of a door. I ran my hand over it, no knob, no hinges, just smooth plaster and the faintest sense of softness, as if the wall wanted to give way. "Rachel," I called, trying to sound casual. "Can you come up here?" She joined me, eyes heavy with sleep, and stared at the outline. "That wasn't there before, was it?" she asked. No, I said, though a strange part of me wasn't sure. We peeled back the wallpaper, our fingers trembling without reason. And there it was, a sealed wooden door with a small brass keyhole and nothing else. A door that didn't exist on the blueprint. A door to a room that wasn't supposed to be there. It took us 3 days to work up the nerve to open the door. Rachel wanted to call someone, a contractor, maybe even the police, but what would we say? "Hi, there's a secret door in our house that doesn't show up on the floor plans. Could someone come investigate our spooky drywall?" No. We needed to see what was inside first. I borrowed a chisel and hammer from the neighbor, told him I was working on an old closet. He didn't ask questions. Around 6 p.m., with the sun setting behind the pines, I wedged the chisel into the seam between the frame and the wall and pried. The door gave way with almost no resistance, like it had been waiting to be opened. Behind it was a narrow hallway, only 6 or 7 feet long, and at the end another door. This one was different. It was white, perfectly clean, with a shiny silver knob and a keyhole with no key. But when I turned the knob, it clicked open easily. The room inside was wrong. Not terrifying, not bloody or broken or full of bones, just wrong. It was completely empty. The floor was spotless wood, freshly polished. The walls were bare and painted a cold off-white. The ceiling light worked even though the wiring looked ancient. But the air was still, thick, like the room hadn't breathed in 100 years. I stepped inside. Immediately, the temperature dropped. My breath fogged in front of me. Rachel, standing at the threshold, crossed her arms against the chill. "We need to close it," she said, voice tight. "Just 1 minute," I whispered. There was a strange echo in the room, even though it was small. Every sound, our breath, our footsteps, bounced back with a delay, like the room wasn't quite in sync with the rest of the house. Then I noticed the walls. The far wall had something on it, a faint outline, like dust had been disturbed. I moved closer. It looked like the silhouette of a chair, and beside it, the shape of a person. Just an outline. Barely there. Like someone had been sitting in that chair for a long time. So long that their shape had been imprinted into the very air. I turned to Rachel to ask if she saw it too, but she was staring straight ahead at the corner of the room. "What?" I asked. "There's someone standing there," she whispered. I looked. The corner was empty. Rachel blinked. Her eyes were glassy. Never mind. We backed out slowly. I shut the door and it latched with a soft click like it had never been opened. That night, Rachel had a nightmare. She said she saw the room again. Only this time it wasn't empty. There was a man in the chair, and he was smiling at her. The nightmares didn't stop. Rachel had them every night. Same room, same man. She said he never moved, just sat in the chair in that blank white room staring at her. But every night, he was a little closer. First across the room, then halfway. By the 5th night, she woke up screaming because he had been standing at the foot of our bed. I didn't know what to do. I told her it was stress, that it was the move, or the isolation, or her imagination. She didn't argue. She just stared at the ceiling for hours like she was waiting for something. And then, things started moving. Small things at first. Rachel's toothbrush wasn't where she left it. My phone charger ended up in the freezer. Doors we had closed were open again. Lights flickered even during the day. Then came the whispering. It started faint, just at the edge of hearing. I assumed it was wind or old pipes. But one night, I was alone in the kitchen when I heard someone say my name. Clear, low, male. I ran upstairs thinking Rachel was messing with me. But she was asleep, curled up on her side, crying. The next day, I set up a small motion-activated camera in the hallway outside the hidden door. I wanted to prove something to myself, anything, that I wasn't going crazy, that maybe someone had broken into our house, that we could call someone. The footage didn't help. The next morning, I checked the clip. It showed the door opening, slowly, at 3:12 a.m. sharp. Rachel and I were both asleep in bed at the time, confirmed by the other camera in our room. Then a figure stepped out into the hallway, tall, thin, wearing my clothes, but the face wasn't mine. It was distorted, like a photograph being stretched across the wrong skull. The figure turned and looked directly into the camera lens, and then it smiled. The feed cut to static. I didn't show Rachel. I told myself it was a glitch, some weird reflection, but I couldn't sleep that night. I kept watching the hallway from our bed, eyes fixed on the crack beneath the hidden door. And then Rachel sat up, not like someone waking from sleep, but fast. Sudden, her head turned toward the door. She whispered something I didn't understand. "Rachel?" Barely audible. She turned to me slowly and smiled in the dark, but it wasn't her smile. I stopped opening the door. Whatever was on the other side, it wanted us to see it. It changed every time we looked, like it was testing us, studying us. One night it was a child's bedroom, soft blue walls and scattered wooden toys. The next night it was a copy of our living room, down to the framed wedding photo and the coffee mug Rachel broke 2 weeks ago. Once it was a hospital room, empty except for a gurney and a heart monitor, ticking even though there were no wires. But the worst time, it was our bedroom, exactly the same, except we were already inside, 2 perfect replicas of Rachel and me lying motionless on the bed, as if we'd been copied. I closed the door and nailed it shut, but it didn't matter. The room started showing up in other places. Rachel walked into our kitchen one morning and stopped cold. "This isn't right," she said, backing away. The fridge, the counters, even the backsplash, it all looked too clean, too perfect, like a showroom version of our kitchen. And in the reflection of the microwave door, I saw it, a flash of white walls and a silver doorknob, flickering like an afterimage. "I think it's learning," I said. Rachel barely spoke anymore. She wandered the house like a sleepwalker, humming songs she didn't know. She stopped eating. Her skin looked paler by the day. I begged her to leave with me. I packed bags, I even booked a hotel. She agreed, or at least I thought she did. But that night, I woke up alone. The front door was wide open. Cold air bled through the house. I ran room to room, calling her name. Nothing. Then I heard the door creak open upstairs. That door. I ran. When I got to the top of the stairs, I saw the hidden door hanging wide open. The hallway was darker than it should have been. My flashlight wouldn't cut through it. I yelled Rachel's name and a voice echoed back. My voice. "Help me." I charged inside. The room was shifting, like it was breathing. The walls rippled like water. I saw shadows on every surface, shadows that moved like people but weren't connected to anyone. Rachel stood in the center, eyes wide, arms limp at her sides. "I'm home," she whispered. He was waiting. I grabbed her and yanked her out. The walls screamed. That's the only word I have for the sound, like a dozen mouths crying out at once. I slammed the door shut behind us and nailed it again. This time I covered it with plaster, paint, furniture. I thought that would be enough, but Rachel never truly came back. Her eyes don't quite follow me anymore. She sleeps with a smile that isn't hers, and sometimes at night I hear her humming from inside the wall. We sold the house 2 months later. No warning, no goodbye. Just packed what we could, signed the papers and left. I didn't care how much money we lost. I didn't care that the real estate agent asked no questions, that the buyers never requested a full inspection. Let them deal with it. We moved west to Colorado, found a bland little suburb with matching houses and perfect lawns. No secrets, no doors that didn't belong. For a while, things were quiet. Rachel never fully recovered. She was functional, mostly. She went to therapy, cooked dinner, even laughed at sitcoms sometimes, but there was always a distance in her eyes, like she'd left part of herself in that room and something else had filled the space. Then our son was born, Caleb. And for a while, life felt normal again. We painted his nursery pale green, read him stories at night, took photos of his first steps. He smiled, babbled, loved music. But on the day he turned 4, he said something that turned my blood to ice. "I don't like the white room upstairs," he whispered while eating cereal. "The man in the corner watches me sleep." I froze. "There's no white room upstairs, buddy," I said. He blinked. "Yes, there is," with the shiny door. I ran upstairs. Nothing. Just bedrooms, closets, the hallway. No strange door, no hidden seams in the wall. But that night I couldn't sleep. Something kept scratching at the edge of my mind. Around 3 a.m. I got up to check on Caleb. He was fast asleep. But the air in the hallway was off, colder, heavier. My skin prickled as I turned to look toward the end of the hall and stopped breathing. There it was, the door, white, clean, silver knob, brass keyhole, just like before. I wanted to believe I was dreaming, that my mind was fractured and playing tricks, but when I reached out and touched it, the door was real, and it was unlocked. Behind me I heard Rachel's voice, soft, hollow. "You said it was over." I turned to her. Her eyes were wet with tears, but they didn't shine like tears should. They were flat, lifeless. "It followed us," she whispered. "It always does." I don't remember what happened after that. Only this: I'm writing this from a motel 3 towns away. Rachel's gone. So is Caleb. I opened the door, and the room was empty. But I felt them. I felt them just behind the walls, like they were watching me through layers of glass. I sealed the motel door with furniture, but it doesn't matter. I heard the humming again last night, low, familiar. And when I turned toward the mirror above the sink, the reflection behind me wasn't mine. It was smiling. Mark hadn't trusted mirrors since the accident. Not because of vanity or fear or some vague superstition. He simply didn't recognize the face looking back. The scars were faint now, the bruising long gone, but the eyes always looked older than he remembered. Not tired, not sad, just aged in a way that made no sense. The doctors said memory loss was normal. That trauma and coma and medication could fog the mind for months, even years. He believed them. Mostly. But the mirror didn't forget. It started with something small, a blink delayed by half a second. He would lean into the bathroom mirror to shave or brush his teeth, and for the briefest moment his reflection wouldn't follow. It was never enough to prove anything, just enough to freeze him in place, razor mid-air, breath held. Then, as quickly as it had lagged, it would catch up, perfectly synchronized again. He told himself it was fatigue, a trick of the light, a remnant of medication. He adjusted the lighting, bought a new bulb, even replaced the mirror once. It kept happening. One evening, standing at the sink, he raised his hand to touch his face. The reflection mirrored the movement as expected. But then he hesitated, just for fun, and kept his hand in place. The reflection moved first, a slow, subtle twitch of fingers, as if the image had grown impatient waiting for him. He pulled away. The reflection didn't. It stared for a moment longer than it should have, then blinked, out of rhythm. He tried to ignore it, but the feeling lingered, like being watched from behind a window or remembered by something he didn't remember knowing. It followed him through the apartment, into the hallway, the bedroom, even in darkened windows at night. Every surface that could reflect seemed to wait for him to notice. He began testing it quietly, methodically. He sat in front of the mirror in silence for long stretches, watching. Sometimes the image behaved. Other times it lagged just enough to make his skin crawl. Once, while reaching for a glass of water, he paused mid-motion. The reflection, already gripping the glass, waited for him to catch up. Then came the dream. A narrow room, a chair. 2 identical men seated face to face, one behind the mirror, one in front. No movement, no sound, just staring. Mark woke with the taste of metal in his mouth and the faint sense that he'd spoken out loud in his sleep. A word he couldn't remember. But when he walked past the mirror later that day, his reflection mouthed something his lips didn't move for. And in the back of his mind, a quiet voice whispered, "I remember it, even if you don't." After the twitch, the delay, the mouth that moved when his didn't, Mark started paying closer attention. He no longer passed mirrors casually. Every glance became a test, a measurement, a dare. He began documenting them in a notebook. Small notes scribbled after each encounter. Blink out of sync, 42 a.m. Slight smile with no cause, right hand flexed before mine did, twice in one day. But what unnerved him most wasn't the movement. It was the knowing. The reflection started responding to things Mark hadn't voiced. Thoughts that never made it past his own skull. Moments he had swallowed and buried and left unsaid, years ago. One morning after waking from a dream he couldn't remember, Mark stood in the bathroom staring into the mirror as he brushed his teeth. The reflection paused, ever so briefly, then raised an eyebrow. And Mark felt it. A thought he hadn't had in years, a woman crying. Her voice hoarse, the sound of porcelain breaking, a promise made in anger, one never kept. He didn't remember the full context, only the guilt. The reflection nodded, just once, as if to say, yes, that happened. That night he found the first message. It appeared faintly across the surface of the mirror, scrawled in fog though he hadn't showered. 3 words, jagged, uneven. "I remember you." He stared for what felt like an hour. The words didn't fade. He wiped the glass clean with a towel. They returned the next day, different words. A question this time, "Do you?" He stopped writing in the notebook after that. What was the point? The mirror already knew. Sometimes it anticipated him, reflected an expression before he felt it, showed him tilting his head a split second before the idea even occurred, like it wasn't mirroring anymore, like it was responding. One evening, out of desperation or madness or both, Mark stood before the mirror and said aloud, "I don't remember what I did." His reflection stared back, mouth closed, eyes unblinking. Then, very slowly, it opened its mouth and formed silent words. Mark couldn't hear them, but he didn't need to. He knew what it was saying. "But I do!" From that night on, the silence in his apartment felt heavier. The mirrors didn't just reflect, they loomed. The darkened windows seemed to shimmer with suggestion. The more Mark tried to forget, the clearer the reflection became. And sometimes, just sometimes, when he left the room and returned a moment later, he would catch the faintest movement in the glass. Not his, just a figure stepping back into place. It cracked on a Tuesday, not from impact, not from heat or pressure. Just a soft hairline fracture across the bottom corner of the bathroom mirror, like a vein slowly forming beneath the surface. Mark hadn't touched it. Nothing had fallen. The house was silent, but the glass was changing. The crack didn't grow, not immediately, but it shimmered faintly, like light passing through something deeper than it should have been. Like depth, true depth, had appeared inside something that was supposed to be flat. That night, he sat across from the mirror for hours. The room grew cold, though no window was open. The reflection looked identical. Same clothes, same position, same breathing pattern. Until 3:12 a.m., that's when it blinked twice in perfect rhythm, while Mark didn't. Then it smiled, soft, almost apologetic, and reached toward the inside of the glass. Not out toward him, back into the mirror, as if pushing at something on the other side. The hand pressed flat against the silvered surface. But Mark saw something more. Beyond the reflection, faint behind the layer of glass and mercury, a room. Not his room. Not a reversed image of the bathroom, but a real space, wider, darker. Walls made of stone or something like it, books stacked in uneven towers, a desk with no lamp, a chair too far from any wall to make sense, and behind it all shadow, subtle, waiting. In the mornings, the mirror returned to normal, almost. Sometimes the fog clung longer to the surface, sometimes his reflection felt slower to arrive. But each night, the same thing returned, the crack, the room behind, and the quiet gestures from the other side. He set up a camera, left it running all night. When he played it back, the footage began normally, static, quiet, dark. Then the reflection stood up, but Mark never moved. The figure in the mirror turned, walked away. Off-screen, the bathroom remained still, but inside the mirror, footsteps echoed, a faint scraping sound. Then a face pressed against the glass, too close, too wide, too curious. Not angry, just eager, as if it had waited a long time to be seen. He stopped recording after that, unplugged the camera, unplugged everything. But the mirror stayed. It was no longer just a surface. It was a window. And what looked back wasn't trying to mimic him anymore. It was preparing. The mirror stopped mimicking him on the 7th night. Mark stood still. The reflection tilted its head. He raised his hand. The reflection smiled faintly, but did not follow. It simply watched, as though the game of matching had ended, and something else had begun. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. His apartment was silent, drawn tight at the edges like skin around a wound. Every surface with even a hint of reflection, darkened windows, stainless steel, polished tiles, felt like it was watching. Only the mirror showed movement, small things, shadows behind the figure, flickers of light where no source existed. The suggestion of someone standing just outside the frame, waiting for an invitation. On the 8th night, Mark made a decision. He stood before the mirror one last time. No lights, no camera, no questions, just him. And it. The reflection met his gaze, eyes calm, steady. Then it raised its hand, and so did he. But when they touched the glass, his fingers sank in. No resistance, no chill. Only a soft pull like warm water folding around his skin. The reflection stepped forward. So did he. They moved as one, closer until the surface shimmered. Then, everything inverted. He blinked. The mirror was still in front of him. He was still in the bathroom. Same light, same sink, same crack at the bottom corner. But something felt off. Too bright. Too still. He turned away, paused, then glanced back over his shoulder. The mirror showed nothing. No reflection, no room. Only a flat wall of silver, smooth and sealed. The next morning, Mark's neighbor knocked on the door. He hadn't been seen in days. When there was no answer, the landlord let them in. The apartment was neat, clean, almost untouched. The bathroom light was on. Inside, Mark was standing in front of the mirror, silent, still, smiling. When the neighbour called his name, he turned slowly. His eyes didn't match. One blinked, the other did not. Later, they found his journal. The final page was blank, except for one sentence written in the centre, "I think I made it back." And below it, in a different hand, "But the mirror's still watching." The attic was warmer than she expected, the kind of dry warmth that seeped into old insulation and wood, left untouched for years. Mara climbed the narrow stairs slowly, brushing past hanging cobwebs and shifting her weight carefully on each creaking board. It had been nearly 2 decades since she last stepped foot up there, back when she was a child visiting her grandparents every summer. Now they were both gone, and the house was hers. She hadn't come back to make it a home, just a temporary retreat. A quiet place outside the city, somewhere to gather herself after too many months of noise, people, and obligations she no longer remembered agreeing to. The attic still smelled faintly of mothballs and cardboard. Old boxes, brittle with age, lined the walls. A collection of yellowed newspapers lay scattered near a toppled lamp. Dust motes danced in the thin beam of light from the single window, which hadn't been opened in years. Mara moved with a kind of reverence, half out of respect, half from something else she didn't name. She opened a box of linens, then another with faded Christmas ornaments. The past was stored in layers, quietly folded between moments. Then she saw it. In the far corner, beneath a fraying quilt, was an object that didn't belong. A rotary phone. Heavy, black, glossy with dust. The kind with a curled cord and a dial that clicked as it turned. It sat on an old wooden crate, perfectly centered, as if placed with intention. There were no wires, no outlet nearby, no jack or socket or sign it had ever been connected to anything. Just the phone. Waiting. She reached out without thinking, brushing her fingers across the handset. That's when it rang. Sharp, mechanical, loud in the stillness. Mara pulled her hand back instinctively. The sound echoed through the attic like something had been woken. The phone rang again. Then a third time. She stepped backward, her heel catching on a floorboard. The ringing continued, steady, precise. Nothing else in the house made a sound. She waited. It didn't stop. It rang 8 times, then 9, then 10. When she finally picked it up, the plastic was warm. Not just from her touch, from something else. She didn't speak. Neither did the other end. Only a soft breath moved through the line, as if the distance between them was no more than a thin pane of glass. And then, just before she could hang up, a click. Not disconnection. Switching lines. The lines stayed alive. And for the first time since entering the attic, Mara realized she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The voice came the second night. The phone had stayed silent all day, as if resting, as if waiting for the dark to return. Mara told herself she should have brought it downstairs or left it in the garbage, but something, curiosity perhaps, or inertia, kept her from moving it. She avoided the attic until just after midnight, when the house was still and the air was thinner. She climbed the stairs slowly, flashlight in hand. The phone was already ringing. Soft, steady chimes, familiar now, almost rhythmic. She didn't hesitate this time. She lifted the receiver and pressed it to her ear. At first, nothing. Then, the voice. Not loud, not deep. Calm like a man speaking from across a small table. He asked a question, not with suspicion, but with quiet certainty. Who's living in my house? Mara didn't respond. She wanted to hang up, to laugh, to breathe, but her body didn't move. The voice didn't repeat itself, it just waited. And then, before she could speak, it began to speak again. This time with details. It described the room she was standing in. The dust on her shoulder. The way her left foot rested on the uneven floorboard she used to trip over as a child. It mentioned the chipped paint on the attic window, and how the light always spilled through in a perfect rectangle each morning, though she'd forgotten that. The voice listed books in boxes she hadn't yet opened. Toys she hadn't thought about in 20 years. It even said the name of her childhood dog, one she never spoke aloud, even to herself, and still it spoke gently, not accusing, just remembering. When she finally found the courage to whisper a single word, "Who are you?" the line went quiet, then the voice responded, You should already know." She hung up, faster than she intended. And for a long while she just stood there in the attic, listening to the silence that followed. It felt thicker than before. Not empty, but filled with something that had been interrupted. The phone didn't ring again that night. But the next morning, she found something odd in the kitchen. A photograph. Lying face up on the counter, though she hadn't brought any photos from storage yet. It showed the house. Years ago. Undeniably hers. And in the window, barely visible in the glare of the print, a woman stood watching. Same hair, same posture, same face. But the photo was dated 1991, the year Mara was born. By the third day, Mara stopped pretending the phone was just a relic. She'd checked every inch of it, flipped it over, unscrewed the base, traced the curled cord back to nowhere. No batteries, no connection, no explanation. But still it rang, always at night, always just before she fell asleep. The voice never raised itself. It simply waited and spoke. Not about the present anymore, but about what came before. It described the sound her grandmother's rocking chair used to make, the way her mother hummed in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening. It remembered the crack in the hallway wall Mara had painted over as a teenager. But it also remembered things she didn't. A room in the house she didn't recognize. A name she didn't answer to. A locked drawer she didn't know existed, until she checked and found it, just where he said it would be. Inside, a small brass key and a folded slip of paper. No writing, only a phone number. 10 digits. She dialed it. The rotary dial turned slower than it should have. Each number clicked into place with a metallic patience. When she finished, the line didn't ring. There was static. Then breathing. And then her own voice. Younger, uncertain, shaking. "I think I made a mistake." Mara didn't speak. She couldn't. The voice continued. "I keep hearing myself call from upstairs. I don't know which one is real anymore." Then silence. And then, "Please stop calling. It's not safe for you to remember." The line went dead. She pulled the receiver from her ear slowly, like lifting her hand away from something burning. That night, the attic felt different, colder, the corners deeper than before, like the angles had stretched. She left the phone alone, but it rang anyway. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned on her recorder. Let it play through the night. When she listened the next morning, the file was mostly static, until the final 10 seconds. Then came laughter. Soft, familiar, her laughter, and beneath it layered like an echo through glass. She thinks she's the only one. She tried searching the number online. No results, no area code listing, no registered address, nothing. But one forum thread buried in an old archived page mentioned a similar phone. A user described receiving calls from a version of themselves they'd never met. One comment stood out. Single sentence, left by an anonymous user. "If the voice on the line knows more than you, you're not the one who stayed." The phone rang every night after that. Not once, not twice, but endlessly. Mara stopped trying to sleep. She stayed downstairs, curled on the couch, lights on, hands over her ears, but the sound still found her, slipping through walls, through floorboards, vibrating in the bones of the house. Each ring a reminder, each pause between them a breath held too long. She thought about smashing it, dragging it into the woods, burning it. But something inside her whispered, "You'd only be silencing yourself." On the 7th night, she answered. She didn't walk up the stairs. She just found herself standing in the attic, hand already on the receiver, like time had skipped a step she hadn't noticed. No fog, no fear, just that calm, familiar quiet. She lifted the phone. The voice came instantly. "I've been waiting for you to remember." It was hers. Same pitch, same cadence, but steadier, more certain. Not like a copy, more like a version that had lived longer. She asked nothing, because something in her already knew the answers. The voice continued. "You're on the wrong side. You stepped out too far. You shouldn't have answered so soon." Mara looked around the attic. It was brighter now, cleaner. Boxes she hadn't unpacked were neatly stacked. Old photographs lined the walls, photos she'd never seen of moments she never remembered posing for. And in the reflection of a dust-covered mirror near the window, she saw herself. But she wasn't holding the phone. She was smiling. The voice returned, quieter, closer. "I've taken care of everything. The keys, the stories, the memories you didn't want. You gave them to me when you let go. Mara tried to speak, but her mouth didn't move. Not in the mirror, not here, not anymore. The attic door shut softly behind her. The light flickered once, then held steady. Weeks later, the house was listed as empty, abandoned. Another relative came to assess the property. They found the attic door locked. Inside, everything was still, except for the phone. It sat silently on the crate until someone reached for it. Then it rang. Once, then again. And when the receiver was lifted, a soft voice asked, "Who's living in my house?" Inside was a classroom, but not like any Cal had ever seen. It looked frozen in time, oak desks arranged in perfect rows, green chalkboard streaked with half-erased equations, a brass clock above the door that read 3 and didn't tick forward. The lights buzzed softly overhead, though no switch had been flipped. There were others already seated. 5 students scattered across the room. Each sat upright, alert but unmoving, like they'd been waiting for him. No one looked up, no one spoke. Cal hesitated in the doorway. He felt the urge to apologize, to say he must have wandered into the wrong place, but his legs moved without him, down the aisle, to the last empty seat, 3rd row, center. As he sat, the door behind him closed with a soft thud. The clock still read, it would always read 3. At the front of the room, the chalkboard changed. Lines of text faded into view, as though drawn by invisible hands. Hist 3.1.11 Temporal Theory and Hidden Structures. Week 1, Recursion and the Architect's Loop. Then, more words. Attendance conversion begins. And just like that, the air changed. Cal felt a pressure behind his eyes, a shimmer behind the fluorescent lights. One of the students turned slightly, not to look at him, but to check the door. The handle was gone. Cal tried to speak, to raise a hand, to say, "This isn't right," but all that came out was a thought. Why does this feel familiar? And somewhere beneath the classroom floor he heard ticking, steady, deliberate, counting down. The classroom inside looked untouched by decades. A chalkboard ran the length of one wall, pale diagrams faintly visible beneath layers of erased notes. Wooden desks filled the room in perfect rows. The smell of chalk, ink and cold stone hung in the air like memory. 10 students sat silently facing forward. No one turned as Cal entered. No one moved. They looked as if they'd been sitting there a very long time. He took the only empty seat in the back and waited. At 3:1, the door clicked shut behind him, and the lecture began. The lecturer entered exactly 1 minute after the door closed. He wore a long black coat buttoned to the neck with sleeves too short for his arms. His hair was slicked flat against his head. His shoes made no sound as he walked, yet the floor creaked faintly beneath him, as though remembering the weight of every step he'd ever taken. He didn't introduce himself, didn't check a roster. He picked up a piece of chalk and began writing, symbols first, then numbers, then full sentences that looped into diagrams and arrows. His voice, when he spoke, was low and precise. He lectured on the theory of collapsed intervals, how time could fray at the edges like cloth too often folded, how certain places, if left untouched long enough, could begin to forget what hour they belonged to. He referenced forgotten calendars, lost clocks, and structures built on forgotten soil. Cal tried to take notes, but the ink from his pen faded as he wrote. Each sentence bled into the page like water, becoming a smear of grey, then disappearing completely. He looked up, unnerved, and glanced at the student beside him. It was a girl with long hair that obscured her face. She sat motionless, hands folded on her desk, eyes staring straight ahead. Her breathing was slow and shallow, as if she were asleep with her eyes open. Cal tried to catch her attention with a whisper. She didn't respond, neither did anyone else. The other students remained perfectly still, no shifting, no scribbling, not even a blink. A few looked pale. One boy's head hung slightly to one side, mouth slightly open, though no sound escaped. They weren't statues, but they weren't fully people either. They were waiting, or serving some purpose that required stillness. After what felt like an hour, the lecturer closed his notebook and looked out at the room. No one moved. He spoke one final sentence that Cal didn't understand, something about clock cycles and identity drift, then nodded once and stepped out the door. The moment he left, the lights dimmed and the air shifted. It was colder, more hollow. Cal rose slowly from his desk. No one else moved. No one even flinched. As he passed them on his way out, he noticed something strange in their eyes, like reflections in a surface that didn't belong to them. He stepped into the hallway. The door shut behind him. He checked his watch. 9:20 p.m. Earlier than when he had entered. Back in his dorm, Cal sat on the edge of his bed, trying to explain the timing, the sensation of stillness, the silence that had wrapped around the class like fog. He checked his email. His 311 had vanished from his schedule. But in the mirror above his desk, his reflection smiled a second too late. Cal returned the next week, not because he wanted to, but because his body woke at 2:57 a.m., fully alert, fully dressed, with no memory of standing up or putting on his shoes. The air in his dorm was still and dry, the window closed, yet it felt like wind had passed through him. He didn't resist. By the time he stepped into the hallway and turned toward the old stairwell, the rest of the campus might as well have ceased to exist. The door to Hawthorne Annex opened at 3 sharp. Inside, the classroom was the same, rows of desks, yellow glow, the smell of chalk and old stone. The same students sat in their places, same postures, same blank stillness. He sat, and the lecture began. That night, the professor spoke of locations with weak chronological anchoring, places that had existed too long or too forgotten to maintain a consistent relationship with time. He explained how architecture could accidentally become recursive, forming echo loops in space, rooms that remembered other versions of themselves and began folding those versions into the present. Cal wrote nothing. He knew now it wouldn't matter. Whatever he brought out of the room would fade by morning. On Thursday, Cal tried to bring a recorder. He hid it in his jacket pocket, powered on before entering the building. The red light blinked reassuringly. But when he returned to his dorm and played the file, there was no lecture, just his own voice, soft, monotone, whispering a phrase over and over, "This is not the first time." He didn't remember saying it. He deleted the file and sat in silence for an hour. The next week, his notes began changing. The entries in his notebook, written in his own hand, shifted when he wasn't looking. Sentences he had never written appeared between the lines. One page bore only a single message in tight, neat handwriting. "Stop mapping the room. It sees that." He tore the page out, but the next night it returned. Same paper, same ink, folded neatly and tucked into the pocket of his coat. He stopped telling people about the class. At first it was because no one believed him, but later it was because he wasn't sure it needed to be told. Like the story had already been written, and the more he tried to explain it, the more it embedded itself. He tried skipping one night, locked his door, hid his shoes, left his alarm off. Still, he woke outside, standing in the hallway of the annex, the door closing softly behind him. When he looked in the mirror the next morning, his eyes didn't blink at the same time. And in the corner of the room, his phone buzzed once with a calendar notification. "Hist 3111. Begins in 2 days. You will attend." Cal stopped counting the weeks. At some point, the boundaries between lectures and waking life blurred too deeply for him to keep track. He no longer remembered what he had studied in his other classes. Couldn't recall the last time he ate with friends. His phone logs were empty, his email silent, except for the weekly reminders, always at the same time. Hist 311, temporal theory and hidden structures, room confirmed, attendance mandatory. No one else received them. He checked. No one had ever heard of Hawthorne Annex. No one could find it, even when he tried to lead them there. But every Tuesday at 2:57 a.m., he would wake. Dressed, shoes on, keys in hand, and the door would open. Each week the classroom changed, just slightly. Sometimes the walls were closer. Other times the air felt heavy, like water. The chalkboard began displaying notes before the professor entered. Once, Cal caught a glimpse of his own handwriting across the slate, although he'd never stepped near it. The professor's face grew harder to remember, sometimes older, sometimes younger, occasionally flickering between both in a single sentence. But most unsettling of all were the students. They stopped looking entirely human, not grotesque, not monstrous, just imprecise. Their features grew blurry, like faces half remembered from dreams. One girl's hands were backward. Another had a mouth that didn't move when she turned to speak, and no sound ever came out. Cal stopped trying to talk to them. Eventually he understood. They weren't there to learn. They were there to hold space. Anchors in a structure too old to stand on its own. And he had begun to feel structural. One night he arrived early. The hallway clock read 2:49. The door to the classroom was already open. Inside, the room was empty. No professor, no students, only silence. But on the desk at the front, a folded sheet of paper rested neatly, as if waiting for him. He opened it slowly, typed in sharp, clean font. Instructor. Office hours, none. Indefinite. His hands trembled as he read it again. The desk creaked behind him. He turned and saw himself. Older, hollow-eyed, wearing the same black coat as the professor. He opened his mouth to scream, to speak, anything. But the figure only raised one finger to its lips, then stepped into him. The next morning, a new student found an email in their inbox. No sender, no timestamp, just a subject line. Welcome to Hist 311, Temporal Theory and Hidden Structures. Below that, Instructor, attendance begins tonight at 3 a.m. You won't remember enrolling. You were always meant to be here. The road stretched out like a ribbon through nowhere. Laura had been driving for over an hour. The town behind her had disappeared into the rear view long ago, and the next speck of civilization wasn't due for another 30 miles. Just 2 lanes of cracked asphalt and endless pines leaning inward, as if listening. The car was silent except for the hum of tires and the occasional click of the blinker, even when she wasn't changing lanes. Just a small glitch, she told herself. Rental cars always came with quirks. This one smelled faintly of old citrus and warm plastic. The air conditioning worked. The brakes didn't squeal. It was enough. She drove with one hand on the wheel, the other cradling a lukewarm coffee she didn't really want. The sky was overcast, flat and colourless, like the kind of weather that forgot how to become rain. Then she saw it. Not out of the window, not on the road, but in the mirror. Just for a second. A face. Not hers. Not even behind her. Just present, in the back seat. She blinked, instinctively glancing over her shoulder. Nothing. The seat was empty. The blanket she'd tossed there earlier still folded, untouched. She adjusted the mirror. It showed only the road behind her. Trees. Fog. The occasional mile marker blurring past. Still she felt it. A pressure behind her eyes. A heaviness in her chest. Like the car had briefly remembered someone else. She told herself she was tired. That the road was hypnotic. That the face was a trick of light, a shadow, maybe even a shape on the glass. But her knuckles tightened on the wheel, and she didn't look in the mirror again for the next 10 miles. Later, as she pulled into a gas station to stretch her legs, she hesitated before turning off the engine. The mirror sat at its usual angle, catching the top half of her face, the edge of the back seat, the square of cloudy window. She stared at it, willed herself to look deeper. Nothing there. No face. No reflection except her own. But as she stepped out and closed the door, the interior light flicked on, and the shadows inside the car shifted just slightly, as though someone had leaned forward to watch her go. The second time it was daylight. Late morning, sun filtering through patches in the trees as Laura merged onto a long, winding highway. She hadn't been thinking about the mirror. She'd almost convinced herself it had been a trick of fatigue, nothing more. But as the road curved and the light shifted, she caught it again. A shape. Faint, greyish, fixed just outside the edges of her focus. She glanced at the rear view. He was sitting behind her. Clearer now. Not just a face, but shoulders, posture. A man, maybe in his 40s. Pale skin, thin lips, eyes open wide, unblinking. The image lasted less than a second before she twisted in her seat, heart pounding. Again, nothing. The back seat was empty. The air was still. She pulled to the shoulder and got out, opening the rear door. Blanket, bag, bottle of water. No man. No signs. She drove the rest of that leg without using the mirror. Tilted it upward until it reflected only the ceiling. Still she could feel it. A low hum behind her, like a thought forming that wasn't hers. That evening, at a roadside motel, she opened her phone to check her photos. On impulse, she scrolled to the camera app and snapped a picture facing the rear window of the car, aiming it toward the back seat. The photo glitched. White washout. A smear of colour. At the centre, barely visible, a pair of eyes, too wide, set too far apart. Watching her through the image, she deleted it immediately. But the next morning when she unlocked her phone, the photo was there again, saved to a hidden album she didn't remember creating. She opened it. There were now 2 photos. The first she remembered. The second was darker, blurry, taken from a lower angle, almost as if the phone had been resting on the car floor, pointing upward. She was in it, driving. And in the background, in the rear seat, he was smiling. Laura returned to the rental agency that afternoon, told them something was wrong with the mirror. They offered to swap vehicles. She agreed, relieved. As she drove off in the new car, she couldn't help but glance once at the old one in her rear view. Parked. Empty. But for a moment before it vanished around a bend, the sunlight hit the windshield just right, and behind the glare, he was still sitting there. The new car wasn't better. The mirror was clean, the seats untouched, the air freshener generic and forgettable, but the feeling remained. A presence, subtle but constant, like static at the edge of her thoughts. Laura tried not to look. She avoided the rear view, kept her eyes on the road. But the silence in the cabin grew heavier, as if waiting for something to break it. She felt the weight behind her, the suggestion of breath, the imagined shift of pressure on the upholstery. So she tried something different. She placed her phone on the dashboard, camera facing the back seat, set it to record. Then she drove. Hours passed. Nothing happened. When she reached a rest stop, she parked under a dim security light and played the footage. For the first 10 minutes, the video was still, just the back seat, slightly out of focus. Then slowly, the image shimmered. The seat dipped. Not dramatically, just enough to suggest someone had settled into it. The footage caught it. The fabric shifted, then held. But no one was there. Not on screen, not when she looked. She kept recording. Every time she drove. Each night the videos showed small changes, a deeper dent, a reflection in the window that didn't match her position, a faint tapping sound, 3 slow beats on the glass behind her. Then one clip showed something else. It was only a few seconds. She had stopped the car at a gas station, walked inside. When she returned, she reviewed the footage out of habit and saw herself, sitting in the back seat, staring at the driver's seat. Expression blank, mouth slightly open, hands folded in her lap, but she had been inside the store. She hadn't come back to the car yet. She deleted the video, threw the phone onto the passenger seat, but the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it had moved closer. She began noticing new details. Her reflection in store windows didn't always align with her movements. At a red light, she turned her head slightly and caught, just for a moment, a hand retreating behind the edge of the rear seat. When she spun around, nothing was there, but her heart was pounding too fast for it to be nothing. The next morning, she awoke in the car. She didn't remember falling asleep. She didn't remember pulling over. Outside, the world was still. Grey sky, empty road, no memory of where she was. She checked the rearview mirror. Her own eyes stared back. But in the seat behind her, a figure sat still. Not a man. Not exactly. A shadow wearing her face, smiling. Laura drove until the roads blurred, until the gas tank ran low and the daylight dimmed into an endless grey that never fully became night. The car's GPS blinked, searching for a signal. Her phone no longer registered time zones, and the man in the mirror, if it was still a man, never moved when she watched, but always seemed slightly closer when she didn't. She hadn't seen her reflection in 2 days, at least not the right one. Every mirror, rear view, window, bathroom showed someone with her face, but not her eyes. They were too still, too quiet, as if something was waiting behind them. She drove back to the rental lot. It wasn't on any map, but she remembered the route, the rusted sign, the cracked pavement, the sagging roof of the small office. She parked and stepped out, keys in hand. Inside, the man behind the desk didn't look up. He simply said, "No record of that vehicle." She insisted. Spelled her name, gave the license plate. He flipped through a binder with yellowed pages and nodded slowly. This car was taken off fleet 3 months ago, unreturned, marked as stolen. She asked who had rented it. He looked her in the eye and said her name. Then asked, "Are you sure you're the one who picked it up?" She walked out, left the keys on the desk. The car remained parked, silent, harmless, like it had never moved at all. She booked a motel room, one night, just to breathe, but as she stepped into the small bathroom, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, and froze, because the version of her in the glass didn't follow, it just stared. Then, slowly, smiled, and something behind the glass leaned forward. Closer. Not out, but in, as if looking through her, searching for a way to fit. She ran, didn't check out, didn't look back, just walked until the air felt cleaner, until the sun warmed her skin again. She took a bus to the city, rented an apartment, tried to forget. But some nights when she walks by parked cars on the street, their windows catch her reflection, and she swears she's in the back seat. Weeks later, someone else rented a car from that same lot. It wasn't listed in the catalogue, no paperwork, but the man at the counter handed over the keys without question, said it was good on gas. The new renter drove off, and behind him, in the mirror, a shape slowly formed. Not a man, not any more, but something wearing a memory, something that smiles too early and blinks just a little too late.